Remember at the end of Squid Game when he's about to call his daughter and the music just cuts out?
Oh, yeah.
You can like practically hear everyone holding their breath.
Right.
That tension, that's what we're going for in this deep dive.
It's amazing how something so simple can be so effective.
Right.
Just silence.
So how do we bottle that magic and pour it into our own writing? That's where Jack Grapes comes in.
Yeah.
So we've got this interview with him where he's breaking down how to use acting techniques to become a better writer.
Okay.
And it's not about like becoming a playwright or anything.
Right.
But it's about tapping into that raw honesty that actors strive for.
He calls it finding your deep voice.
Yeah.
That authentic self that we kind of cover up with all the rules and expectations that we learned about writing.
Totally. It's like instead of writing from our gut, we end up trying to sound like how we think a writer should sound. Grapes has this analogy that really clicked with me. You know, think about how you are at home with your family, totally yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine being on stage or in front of a camera.
Right.
Suddenly, you're aware of every little thing you do.
I think that happens with writing, too.
Yeah.
It's like you get so self-conscious,
Yeah.
worried about being judged,
Yeah.
and you lose that natural voice.
It's like trying to have a heart-to-heart with someone, but you're constantly wondering if they're judging your every word.
Exactly.
So Grapes, he actually encourages writers to embrace that initial awkwardness.
Okay.
He even says, it's okay to write a shitty first draft.
He'd rather take a chance on something rough
Yeah.
than play it safe and end up with something predictable and boring.
And that's where the genius of it is, right? It's not about actually aiming for a bad draft,
Right.
but it's about giving yourself permission to explore, to make mistakes, to
Yeah.
just get those ideas out.
Without that inner critic
Right.
breathing down your neck.
It's like in any creative field, music, painting, even starting a business, you
Yeah.
have to be willing to experiment. You got to try things that might not work.
Yeah.
Iterate your way to something great.
Like learning to ride a bike.
Yeah.
You didn't just hop on and ride away. Right?
No.
Probably some wobbly starts. Maybe a few scrapes and bruises.
For sure.
Writing's the same way. You got to get comfortable with falling off before you can really take off.
So how do we actually do that? How do we find that deep voice and get the ideas flowing?
Well, Grapes has some techniques he's developed. And one that stood out to me was the transformation line. Can you break that down a little bit?
So it's really simple but powerful. You start with a basic statement, something like, I hid the birthday cake,
Okay.
and then you keep massaging it, as Grapes puts it. You peel back the layers to uncover a deeper meaning. So I hid the birthday cake might become, I was hiding.
Okay.
And then the question becomes, what are you hiding? What are you keeping tucked away? Maybe even from yourself? I love that. It's like using a single sentence as a key to unlock a whole world of hidden emotions and memories. It takes you beyond the surface level.
And what's fascinating is it kind of bypasses that logical overthinking part of your brain.
Yeah.
It's not about plotting or outlining.
Right.
It's about letting your emotions lead the way.
Which I think is a perfect segue to another one of Grapes' ideas that really caught my attention. He claims that in all of Western literature, there are only 5 basic voices.
5.
5.
It sounds crazy, but
Okay.
the way he explains it, it makes a lot of sense. It's not about limiting yourself.
Right.
It's about understanding the different tools that you can use to create different effects.
Gotcha.
It's like a musician who can play multiple instruments.
Okay.
They can use each one to create a different mood or feeling.
Okay, so walk me through these 5 voices. What are they?
So you got straight talk. That one's pretty self-explanatory, just like how we talk in everyday conversation.
Okay, that's easy.
Casual, straightforward. Emails to your friends, that conversation you had with the barista this morning, that's straight talk.
All right. What else?
And then there's lost world.
Lost world.
Poetry, imagery, metaphors, the whole works.
Okay.
This voice creates atmosphere. It pulls you into this world that feels rich and textured.
Like the difference between describing a sunset as pretty versus painting a picture with words.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you're writing a scene in a fantastical setting, you might lean on lost world to really bring that world to life.
I got it. All right, what's next?
Then there's written song. This one's all about rhythm and repetition. Think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. It's not just the words, it's the way they're delivered. The repetition builds and builds until it reaches this crescendo. You can use this to create a similar effect in your writing, to drive home a point, or create urgency.
I'm starting to see how these different voices can really add layers to your writing.
Yeah.
What are the last 2?
We've got absence of field. This one's all about disruption. breaking the rules of traditional storytelling.
Interesting.
It could be nonlinear, fragmented, almost dreamlike. It's often used to reflect a character's state of mind, like if someone's having a panic attack
Yeah.
or experiencing a trauma.
So it's like you're using the writing itself to kind of mirror what's happening inside the character's head.
Exactly. And the last one is prophetic. Think those grand pronouncements, those sweeping statements that offer a glimpse into some larger truth. It's often used in speeches, sermons, even just moments of profound insight, like the voice of wisdom, offering guidance or warning.
Wow. So different. But how do we actually use them? Is it like you pick one and stick with it for the whole story? Or is it more about weaving them together?
That's the beauty of it. There's no formula. It's
Mhm.
about understanding the different tools that you have and using them strategically to create the effects that you want. Just like a painter wouldn't use only one color.
Yeah.
You don't have to limit yourself to just one voice.
So it's more like having a whole palette of voices to choose from, and you can kind of blend them together.
Exactly. That's what makes writing so exciting. You're not just telling a story, you're composing a symphony of words.
Yeah.
And using those different voices to create a really rich and layered experience for the reader.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to that in my own writing. But I'm curious, what about talent? Where does that fit into all of this?
Well, get ready for another mind bender. Grapes actually says that talent can be the obstacle to genius.
Wait, what? Isn't talent like the key ingredient? How could it hold you back?
Sounds counterintuitive, right? But think about it. When you're good at something, it's easy to get comfortable. You rely on what you already know. But that can also keep you from pushing yourself, taking risks, exploring new territory.
So it's like talent can make you complacent,
Uh-huh.
whereas a lack of talent might actually force you to be more resourceful, more
Mm.
innovative.
Exactly. And that's where Grapes' idea of the accidents of genius comes in. Those moments when we stumble into something we didn't even know we were capable of.
He talks about this amazing example in the interview, something about Beethoven accidentally composing a jazz moment, centuries before jazz even existed.
Yeah. It was like he was channeling something way ahead of his time, something he couldn't have consciously created. And Grapes believes these kinds of breakthroughs, they often happen when we're not trying to be brilliant, when we're just playing around, experimenting, letting our intuition guide us.
So it's like the whole happy accidents thing. Sometimes the best ideas come when we least expect them, when we're not putting so much pressure on ourselves.
Exactly. And that ties back to the idea of embracing the shitty first draft. Both are about letting go of control, trusting the process, being open to the unexpected.
Okay, so we've talked about finding our deep voice, embracing the shitty first draft, and understanding those 5 basic voices.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put all of this together? How do we translate these ideas into writing that truly grabs the reader and doesn't let go?
Well, Grapes has another analogy that I think really helps to illustrate this. He compares a story to a car.
Okay, walk me through this.
So the outer design of the car, the sleek lines, shiny paint job, that's like the plot of your story.
Okay,
It's what we see on the surface, what draws us in.
so what's the engine?
The engine is what he calls the invisible motor. It's the mechanics of the writing itself. The sentence structure, word choice, pacing, all those things that work together to create a smooth and engaging reading experience.
Okay, and what about the oil?
Ah, that's the most important part.
Okay.
The oil is the emotional truth of the story. It's what gives the story its heart, its depth, its resonance. Without it, the story might be technically sound, but it won't move the reader on a deeper level.
That makes sense. We might not be able to dissect every story we love and pinpoint exactly why it works.
Right.
But we know when it does. We feel it in our gut, like that music cutting out in Squid Game. It's that invisible motor humming along, powered by emotional truth that keeps us hooked.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, Grapes talks about a couple of specific examples. He mentions a phone call that he received about his father's death
Mm-hmm.
and how the emotional weight of that moment just seeped into his writing.
Wow.
He also talks about the last paragraph of On the Road, how Kerouac's prose just captures that sense of longing and bittersweetness that resonates with readers decades later.
So it's not just about using fancy techniques or hitting all the right plot points.
Right.
It's about tapping into something deeper, something authentic, something that speaks to the human experience.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Grapes' approach so compelling. It's not about following a set of rules. It's about trusting your instincts, embracing the messiness of the creative process, letting your deep voice speak its truth.
It's funny, we've been talking about all these techniques and ideas, but sometimes I think the most powerful writing comes from those little, almost accidental details. You wouldn't necessarily plan for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like when you're telling a story to a friend
Mm.
and some tiny little detail pops up,
Yeah.
that suddenly makes the whole thing come alive.
Graves actually talks about this in the interview.
Uh-huh.
He mentions how he used to teach kids to write by having them focus on sensory details, like the sound of a quarter dropping back into a payphone.
And those tiny little details
Yeah.
can be so evocative,
Yeah.
they can transport you right back to a specific time and place. It's like they bypass the logical part of your brain and go straight to your emotions.
It's like the smell of your grandma's cookies or the feeling of sand between your toes,
Yes.
Those sensory memories that can trigger a whole cascade of emotions.
I think that's what Grapes is getting at with this whole invisible motor concept. It's not just about the big plot points or the dramatic twists. It's all the little things that work together to create a truly immersive experience.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? How do we capture those tiny fleeting moments and translate them into words on a page?
Well, part of it is being present, paying attention to the world around you, noticing those details that most people overlook. It's like training yourself to see the world through a writer's lens, to be constantly observing, absorbing.
So like carrying around a mental notebook,
Yep.
jotting down these little snippets of conversation, those quirky observations, the sensory details that kind of spark your imagination.
Exactly. And then it's about trusting your intuition, letting those details percolate in your mind and seeing what connections emerge. Sometimes the best ideas come when you're not even actively trying to write, when you're just going about your day, letting your subconscious do the heavy lifting.
It's like that saying, inspiration strikes when you least expect it.
Yeah.
You could be doing the dishes, walking the dog, and suddenly, bam, an idea hits you like a bolt of lightning.
And then, it's about capturing that lightning in a bottle, getting those ideas down on paper before they vanish like smoke.
Speaking of capturing moments,
Yeah.
Grapes tells this really interesting story
Okay.
about a 24-hour film he saw called The Clock. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes. It's amazing, isn't it?
So for those who haven't seen it, it's basically a montage of clips from different movies, all featuring clocks and watches.
Okay.
But the kicker is that the clocks in the movie are synced up with real time. So if you watch it at 10:15 a.m., the clocks in the movie will also show 10:15 a.m.
And what's so fascinating is that even though it's all these different clips from different movies with different characters and storylines, somehow it creates this cohesive, strangely mesmerizing experience.
It's like you're watching time itself unfold on screen, but it's also this unexpected tapestry of human moments, big and small, all connected by the simple ticking of a clock.
And I think what Graves is highlighting with this example is the power of juxtaposition. Finding unexpected connections between seemingly disparate things. Like he's saying, beauty and meaning can be found in the most mundane, everyday moments if you know how to look for them.
Reminds me of that quote by Annie Dillard. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's about paying attention to the details, to the small moments that make up the larger tapestry of our existence.
And that's what makes Graves' work so inspiring. It's not about following a rigid set of rules.
Right.
It's about being open to new possibilities, trusting your instincts, embracing the messiness and the magic of the creative process.
It's about being willing to experiment,
Yes.
to play, take risks, even if it means failing sometimes. Because in those moments of failure, we often discover something new, something unexpected that pushes us beyond our comfort zones and helps us grow.
Exactly. It's about embracing that childlike sense of wonder and curiosity. Approaching writing as a process of discovery rather than a quest for perfection.
Which brings us back to another one of Grapes' ideas that I think is worth revisiting. Okay. He talks about how even something as seemingly simple as a sentence can be constructed in a way that either reflects natural speech or sounds more literary, more writerly.
He uses the example of a sentence that starts with the participle phrase, like, standing by the window, I could see it was going to rain.
Right.
Grammatically, it's perfectly correct.
Right.
But most people wouldn't actually say it that way.
Right. It sounds a little stiff and formal.
Yeah. We'd probably say, I was standing by the window and I could see it was going to rain.
Exactly.
It's a subtle difference, but it makes the writing feel more natural, more conversational.
And I think that's what Grix is getting at here. It's about being aware of the choices we make as writers, even down to the level of individual sentences. Understanding how those choices affect the tone, the rhythm, the overall feel of our writing.
So it's like we have this whole toolbox
Yeah.
of techniques and approaches,
Mm-hmm.
and it's up to us to figure out which tools work best for each story.
Like learning from the best. Watching a master chef at work, trying to absorb their techniques and their secrets.
And it's not just about reading for pleasure.
Yeah.
It's about reading like a writer,
Yeah.
paying attention to the craft,
Yeah.
asking yourself, how did they do that?
It's like being a detective.
Yes.
Looking for clues and patterns, trying to decipher the code that makes a particular piece of writing so effective.
And then taking what you've learned and applying it to your own work. Experimenting, playing around, seeing what happens.
It's about being willing to steal from the best, as they say.
Right.
But then making those stolen techniques your own.
Uh-huh.
Bending and shaping them to fit your own voice and style.
And I think that's what Grapes is ultimately advocating for. It's about embracing the messiness, the uncertainty, the joy of discovery that comes with the creative process, trusting your instincts, being willing to take risks, letting your deep voice guide you, even if you don't know exactly where it's leading.
Because sometimes the best stories are the ones we don't even know we're telling, the ones that emerge from the depths of our subconscious, fueled by that emotional oil.
And those are the stories that really resonate.
Yeah.
They connect with readers on a deeper level. They stay with them long after they've finished reading.
And I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into Jack Grapes and the art of method writing. We've covered a lot of ground, from embracing the shitty first draft, to exploring the 5 basic voices, to capturing those fleeting, almost accidental moments that make a story come alive.
I think the most important takeaway is that writing doesn't have to be this rigid, rule-bound process. It can be a playful and joyful exploration, a journey of self-discovery, a way of connecting with the world around us and making sense of our own experiences.
So if we're taking all this to heart, where do we even begin? It feels like Grapes has given us this huge toolkit, but maybe we need the instruction manual too.
I think that's the exciting part. There isn't one. It's more like he's given us the key to the artist's studio and said, go explore, make a mess, see what you discover.
Yeah. And maybe that's the point. It's not about finding the right way to write, because there isn't one.
Right.
It's about finding your way, the approach that resonates with you, that helps you tap into that deep voice and bring your unique perspective to the world.
Remember what we were saying earlier about the accidents of genius?
Yeah.
They happen when we let go of the need to control everything, when we're open to the unexpected.
It's like when you're a kid and you're just playing. You're not worried about the outcome. You're just enjoying the process.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's when the most amazing things happen.
I think that's a good reminder for all of us, whether we're seasoned writers or just starting out. It's okay to not know everything, to make mistakes, to experiment, to play. In fact, those are often the ingredients for true creativity.
So I guess what we're really saying is just write. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about being perfect. Just get those words down on the page.
And don't be afraid to tap into those raw emotions.
Yeah.
Those personal experiences that might feel a little too vulnerable to share.
Yeah.
Because that's where the real power lies. And the willingness to be honest, to be open, to let yourself be seen.
It's funny. We started this deep dive talking about that tense moment in Squid Game. And now it feels like we've come full circle, because in a way, writing is kind of like playing a high-stakes game too, right?
Oh, for sure.
You're putting yourself out there, you're taking risks. There's always the possibility of failure.
But there's also the possibility of creating something truly magical.
Right.
Something that moves people, makes them think, stays with them long after they've finished reading.
And isn't that what it's all about?
I think so. And if you find yourself getting stuck, remember those 5 voices.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Play around with them, experiment, see how they can shift the mood and the energy of your writing.
Don't forget the invisible motor.
Yes.
Pay attention to the rhythm of your sentences, the flow of your paragraphs, the way you're building tension and release.
And most importantly,
Yeah.
remember the oil. What's the emotional truth that's driving your story? That's what will make it resonate.
So there you have it, our deep dive into Jack Grapes and the art of method writing. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired
Me too.
to go write something, even if it's a shitty first draft.
Maybe those shitty first drafts will lead to some unexpected breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Some moments of genius we didn't even know we were capable of.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed the journey. and that you'll join us again next time for another exploration into the world of ideas. Until then, keep diving deep.